So my name's Nadine, and I work at Webstep as a UX designer. I'm not actually a schooled designer. I have a degree in journalism and another one in digital management. And the design part, I've literally learned by doing. And by now, I've been working in the field of UX design for about 6 years. The past 3.5 of those in Webstep as part of what's now become a very solid team of designers. So I care a lot about helping others understand the power and the potential of UX design. A lot of people know that UX stands for user experience, but knowing what it stands for and understanding the details that make it up and make it work are two very different things. And in fact, most people and even designers themselves can have a hard time explaining what designing for user experience actually means and what the value of UX is. So this is what I'm going to try and sum up for you over the next 15 minutes. And as promised, I'll be as concrete as possible. So on that note, let's start by getting rid of some of the confusion related to all of the terms and abbreviations that make the design discipline so difficult to understand. Because it's not easy to understand what all of these mean and what the differences between them are. But put very simply, these are all just different ways of saying the same thing, which is that we create products and services that are meaningful and relevant and delightful to users. And we're focusing on the needs of real users, real people, to do just that. And for the sake of simplicity, I will be using the term UX design or just UX for the rest of this talk. And I suggest that you also do the same if you find yourself in a situation where you're talking about UX design. So now that we have clarified that, I have made 2 promises for this talk. I promised to tell you how UX design can add value to your project or business and how you can get the most out of your design team. Now, these are 2 quite tricky questions to answer. But the beauty of it is that if we answer one of them, then we've sort of answered them both, because enabling your designers to do their work properly will at the same time enable them to add value to whatever they are working on. However, if we're ever going to realize the full potential of a design team and the true value of UX, then we have to start by correcting some very common misconceptions about UX design, just like with the terms and abbreviations. So that's what we're going to do right now. And along the way, we'll look at some examples from projects that the UX design team in Webstep has worked on. So this may be the most common misconception, and we hear this from potential clients all the time. They say that they don't have money or the time to do even the most vital of UX design activities, such as user research and user testing. But the truth is, it's difficult to bring new things to life, and innovation is risky, and we know that failure rate is high. So in a way, you can say that companies can't afford not to do these activities. So what we like to respond with is that UX design actually reduces risk and cost. Although it means bringing on board more people, which is initially an added cost, UX designers have a toolbox of methods and processes where we can pick and choose those that make sense for the particular project or the particular budget. So for example, without spending very much, great business opportunities can be discovered from doing user research with just a handful of users. And similarly, we can put together a really simple prototype and test it with just 4 or 5 users, and that's cheap. It can reveal usability issues, and it can show the product team what works and what doesn't. And it can even show that what we're making isn't even what the customers need or want. So in a way, you can say that having a tight budget is an even better reason to invest in UX design, because at least that way you can prevent spending what little you do have on making the wrong thing. And many companies do just that. They take a pass on UX and they end up making the wrong thing. And here's an example from a Webstep client that I'm not actually allowed to name, but I still wanted to tell you what happened because it's such a typical chain of events. So this company came to Webstep and asked us to help them build a customer portal. We challenged them in an effort to have them do a week of user testing. But the client declined and said, no thanks, we got this. We know our customers and what they need. So they went on and they spent about 4 months and 500,000 kroners on developing this portal. And then they get a new employee who starts fighting really hard to get approval to run a user test. And when they run the test, it reveals that the company's assumptions about what their customers needed were actually incorrect. So the client was forced to redo about 2/3 of the already developed application, and time to market was delayed by around 2 months. So this could obviously have been avoided had they just done their research and some testing from the get-go. The online travel company Expedia has done something that really shows the value of user testing. Now, this isn't work done by Webstep, but I still wanted to show you because it's a great example. So when analyzing customer behavior in Google Analytics, Expedia found that this tiny little optional form field called company name was really confusing to users, because what happened was they entered the name of their bank rather than the name of the company that they work for. And after having done that, they then went on and entered their bank's address rather than their home address. So when the time came to submit the form and process the credit card, it obviously failed because the address was incorrect. So Expedia removed this field, and it resulted in $12 million of added revenue every year. So this is a great example of how a very, very simple testing that does not cost a lot of money can give incredible results. And I doubt that anyone at Expedia bothers discussing the cost of UX design today. Another common misconception is that UX designers should be involved in the final stages of a project to make a product pretty before release. Now, bringing on board designers to make it pretty after a product is already built is a major mistake, and it's a great way of wasting both time and money. You might have noticed this dog from my opening slide. Now, this is my way of conveying that UX designers can't make unicorns out of dogs, because design is not just decoration. UX design is about making the right thing, and it's about innovating and problem solving. So asking a designer, just make this look nicer, will be perceived as a bit of an insult. And we obviously do make really pretty things, but making a solution look great is simply the final touch, because a user or a customer won't care much about how a product looks if she's unable to use it. Or if we flip that around, we can say that a beautiful product that doesn't work very well is ugly. So as UX designers, our main job is to make sure that we create the right solutions at the right time and in the right way. A great example of this is a job that I did with one of my colleagues a few weeks back for a company called Åbakke. This photo shows one of the interviews that we did. What happened here was the client had spent an entire year and quite a lot of money on developing a dashboard for one group of employees. And me and my colleague, we were given 60 hours split between the two of us, so not even 2 full weeks, to come in and research the employees' needs. And after just a handful of interviews, we were able to conclude that not only was the content of the dashboard irrelevant, but this group of employees had no need for a dashboard or time to make use of one. So we fortunately quickly identified another group of employees who could make use of a dashboard. And we did some rapid user testing to find out which type of content they could need in the dashboard. And within the 60 hours, we even found the time to develop concepts for leveraging 2 business opportunities that we discovered along the way. Another example that's relevant in terms of making it the right thing before making it pretty is the work that we've done for Fuelbox. For those of you who don't know it, this startup company makes physical boxes that contain questions that can help start more meaningful conversations between friends and partners and family members and colleagues. We were asked to help them go digital so that their customers could use Fuelbox on their phones. So we started with user research to investigate whether this is something the customers actually wanted. And this photo shows some of the work that I did to structure the user insight that I collected through user interviews. Afterwards, we then started mapping out the ideal customer journey. And the purpose of that was to find out how potential customers would discover and pay for and make use of the product. And only after all of this was done did we start to work on the user interface, a process that often begins something like this, with rough concept sketches on a whiteboard. And when we were pleased with our sketches, we then turned them into digital form, and we added just the right level of detailing and coloring needed to test them with real users. So finally, when the users gave us feedback that confirmed that we were getting it right, that we had made the right thing and we had given it its right form, only then did we add the visual design that we had developed along the way, and only then did we put together a proper digital prototype that was ready for development. So as you can see, a lot of design work was done in order to make sure that we were making the right thing before we even started thinking about the interface or making it nice to look at. So let's all make this leap together now from thinking that UX design is just these activities concerning the visual parts of design, to understanding that UX is actually all of these activities and more. Because once we understand that UX is all of this and not just decoration, that is when we can start talking about and working on realizing the value of it. Now, this is an interesting one because deciding where UX should sit in your organization will influence how much of an impact the UX designers will be able to make. Now, in general, UX designers should not sit with marketing, because organizing UX designers with marketing sort of suggests that they're there to do only the visual parts of UX design. Where you really want your designers is where great impact can be made. So as a rule of thumb, that is with the product or engineering units. When we work with our clients, we see that putting UX designers with product or engineering units is the best way to create small wins that really show the value of UX. And enabling UX designers and developers to work side by side, that's how the real work gets done, and also how great user experiences are made, because great user experiences come from collaboration. But UX designers should obviously still communicate with marketing and with all of the other business units, and that way sort of function as the glue between them. And however you decide to organize your UX designers, you have to remember that the user experience is not just the responsibility of the people called UX designer. It's the responsibility of your entire company, because companies that don't embrace a customer-centered methodology will be overtaken by a competitor who does. Now, the final misconception that we'll address today, and my personal favorite, is the people that think that they don't need UX design. They say that they talk to their customers all the time, so they think they know their customers well enough to make stuff for them. What often happens, though, is that we tend to project our own behaviors and reactions onto users, because as humans, we have a tendency to assume that others will behave similarly in a similar context. So just think about the recent presidential election in the US. Whoever you were rooting for, I bet that you find it hard to believe that your friend or neighbor or colleague would hope for the other candidate to win. This is actually called the false consensus effect. And we fall prey to it all the time. And it can be a big mistake when we're making products and services. Because remember, we all have different backgrounds and we have different experiences with user interfaces and different mindsets and different goals. So that means that we are not representative of our users, almost no matter how well we think we know them. We're completely biased, and they are not us, which is why you are not your user has become sort of a UX mantra. So what we need to do is we have to acknowledge our own bias and then overcome it. And all we have to do to overcome it is test. We have to test with real users. We need to learn who they are and how they respond to a design by watching them use the design. And also, don't just test to validate, test to investigate. And if you need help, this is when you should hire UX designers who obviously are also humans and therefore tend to generalize sometimes. But at least as UX designers, we are trained in tools and methods that help us create systems that are right for the people who will actually use them. So I have summarized my main points for you in this cheat sheet. So if nothing else, I hope that you can remember these next 6 points. So number 1, you are not your user. You have to do the research. 2, test to investigate, not just to validate. I tested this presentation on a number of different people and changed it a little bit every time, just to increase the odds of me being able to teach you something today. 3, involve designers as early as possible. The earlier, the better, and the earlier, the more value they will be able to create. Great user experiences come from collaboration. And remember that user experience is the responsibility of your entire company. 5, UX designers make the right thing and then they make it pretty. And finally, your users will have an experience either way, and it's up to you to decide if that's going to be a good one or a bad one. So what now? I promise this will be concrete, so that's what I'm going to try and boil it down to now. But it's important for me to say that I'm not only talking to executives or the people that we traditionally look at as people in positions of power. You can be a marketer or an engineer or a salesperson and still argue the case for UX design. And in that case, I hope that I've provided you with some arguments now. But anyhow, if you are planning or running projects related to digitalization or process improvements, or you're developing a new business application or a concept or product or service of any kind, and you don't currently have designers involved, you should start by fixing that. So you should invest in 1 designer at least, preferably 2. And if possible, you should involve them early and keep them involved throughout the entire development process. If you want to be extra careful, you can start with just 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be a major commitment. And you can even ask them to prove their worth. Good designers will come up with something of value in just a week or 2. We see it all the time. And when they do come up with something of value that quickly, it will demonstrate the value of UX design to your project or your organization, which I can promise you is going to be valuable in itself. If you'd like to email me, then this is my email address. And when my slides are shared at some point, you will find on the final one some suggested further reading and YouTube videos for those of you who are interested in learning a little bit more about UX design.